Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast. I'm Abby Brenker, sitting here with Alan Kudan.
Hello.
And today we are talking about the history of demonic summoning.
This is a big topic.
It's a big topic, but let me narrow it down for you a little bit. Because obviously, the belief in demons could fill pages of many volumes, and has.
Pages of many volumes?
The belief in the devil, the belief in summoning the devil, the belief with deals and pacts of the devil, black masses, all these things are sort of like Satanism, things that are offshoots of it, but we are going to very specifically try to focus ourselves, for the most part, on the summoning of demons. Not the devil, demons.
So, lesser demons?
Yes.
No archdemons?
We'll see. We'll see where this episode takes us.
Is it arch or arc?
Arc.
Arc.
Archangel.
Archangel.
And as always, I found out a lot of very interesting things about the world, I would say.
Oh, yeah?
While researching this.
What's your favorite thing that you discovered in this whole process?
My favorite thing that I discovered is that the belief in demons, really, and what demons are, largely, historically, before monotheism, they were the pagan gods. They were gods of different cultures. And when monotheism came about, they all were sort of reskinned into demons. Because anything that wasn't God, you know?
Oh, my question for you is, say you summon a demon.
Yeah.
And you like hold on to the demon and then you do it again, you know?
What do you mean you hold on to the demon?
Like you don't just like banish them. Like, can you collect demons?
You can conjure multiple demons in a ritual.
Because it's, you know, I don't know. It feels almost like Pokemon at that point.
Okay, we'll talk about that. But
because, you know, you're collecting them.
You're not
making them
them.
fight.
You're not making them fight. That's not the point.
I don't know. What is the point? Why are you bringing them there?
The point, for the most part, is that you want them to do your bidding.
Yeah, fighting.
No, okay. Well, I guess that's what you're asking for.
Yeah, we are slowly recreating Pokemon.
Okay. Let's talk about our sources today before we get into it. And there was also a bunch of historic documents that I read that I will cite as we go, you know, when it's sort of relevant. But modern sources. A book by Ed Simon called Pandemonium, An Illustrated History of Demonology.
I will have you know that book has been sitting in my shopping cart for many years.
Wow.
Because I was going to get it for you as a gift. But the opportunity really never, you know, it's just like those things like, you know, what's the perfect time to gift someone a copy of Pandemonium?
Valentine's Day.
That's the problem. We have other demonic things to give you on Valentine's Day.
A PBS article by David Crary of the Associated Press. Ancient, but small in number, Zoroastrians confront depletion of their faith. An archaeology.org article by Eric A. Powell called The World of Egyptian Demons. The Rationality of Renaissance Magic by George W. Dawes. Aleister Crowley's autobiography, The Confessions of Aleister Crowley, a book by Owen Davies, Grimoires, A History of Magic, a Vice article, The Men Who Love to Worship the Devil and Summon Demons by Grace Wilson, a book by Ronald Hutton, The Wild Hunt and the Witch's Sabbath, Wikipedia, IMDb, a bunch of movies, and also a bunch of old texts and ancient grimoires that we will talk through as they come up. Dating back to the Paleolithic age, people have believed in demons and the underworld. Similar to early pagan beliefs, it's thought to have first been a way to explain the harsh aspects of life in the world around us. But I do want to say, in a lot of cases, again, kind of circling back to what I said at the beginning, in a lot of cases, demons were not demons, they were spirits, they were gods, they are not necessarily evil or dark, and then it's all going to come together. Just stick with me.
Well, yeah, because, you know, nothing was anyone's fault. If your crops are failing, it's not because you're a bad farmer. It's because you got demons on your land. Or it's the moon blood. It's cursed.
Demons also have ties to several major religions, of course. So again, after the introduction of monotheism, demons start to have ties to major religions. It's thought that much of this mythology originated with Zoroastrianism.
What's that?
Which is an Iranian religion, one of the oldest organized religions in the world, which influenced early Judaism in the Persian era and went on to inform Christianity and Islam.
Is this still around?
Yes, and actually there's only about 125,000 practitioners left.
No, I've never heard of it before now.
I hadn't either. It dates back more than 3,000 years.
Wow.
And of course, it's important to our subject today because it predates Christianity and Islam and thus laid the foundation in some ways for the belief of demon in those religions.
Doesn't predate Judaism.
No. I'm going to quote from the PBS article by David Crary. Quote, "At its core, Zoroastrianism emphasizes a never-ending battle between good and evil.
I told you they're fighting.
A contest between the religion's God and the evil spirit. Believers have the freedom to make good or bad choices. They were exhorted by Zoroaster to think good thoughts, say good words, and do good deeds. Scholars say these tenets and other aspects of Zoroastrianism had significant influence on other religions, notably Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Buddhism," end quote. But one thing I really want to drill into the consciousness of everybody listening is that different cultures have different versions of demons. And that's an understatement. So I'm just going to do a really high level talk through about what demons and the belief of demons means to different religions and different cultures across the globe.
Sure.
Because what we're going to kind of end up talking about today is a very specific thing, but I think it's good to kind of just lay the global groundwork, if you will.
I understand.
So, for example, some religions believe that demons are minions of the devil, like some sects of Christianity. Others believe that they are neutral. For instance, the word daemon, D-A-I-M-O-N, in ancient Greek did not equal malicious intent, simply referred to a being of divine power. In Plato's Symposium, a priestess teaches Socrates that love is in fact a daemon, that daemons sit between the mortal and the spiritual world. And of course, this word went on to become demon in the modern sense. So the source of the actual word daemon is from this Greek belief in just almost like someone who goes between the world of the spirit and the world of the mortal.
Sure.
It was not meant to be a minion of the devil.
Right, because there was no devil yet.
Right.
Not until the 80s.
What happened in the 80s?
Well, I don't want to jump ahead. I don't want to jump ahead in your outline.
In some religions, demons protect the underworld. In Islamic cultures, jinn and demons can be invoked for various reasons.
Wait, are we lumping jinn and demons in the same box?
No, I'm just giving a very high level, sort of broad strokes, what demons mean in different parts of the world.
Okay.
In ancient Egypt, there was a belief that demons could come to your aid. Demons have actually, though, caused some issues and confusion for scholars in ancient Egyptian study because there's no word in the language for demon. And the lines between deities and demons are very thin and sometimes blurred. Again, very similar to all of this stuff, that even old world gods had good and bad sides, right?
Yeah, man.
If you think about any mythology, gods are imperfect, except for Christian mythology and Judaism.
Wait, what?
If you think about the gods of ancient Rome or Greece or Egypt, they're imperfect gods. They have flaws.
Right, because they're humanized.
Right, which is how many cultures believe in these things.
Yes. Yeah, we're not here to dissect organized religion.
No, we do by default, but yeah. It's believed that ancient Egyptians acknowledged the existence of malicious deities by highlighting their names with red ink because there was no word for it. So when you find these old papyrus texts, if things are underlined or highlighted with red ink, that's how they would denote that, oh, this one wasn't so good.
I'm getting flashbacks to middle school with my 10,000 highlighters. This is important. This is more important, so it gets a different color.
In ancient Egypt, there are two categories: guardians, who are tied to protecting a certain place, and wanderers, who are believed to have the power of illness, death, plagues, and mental illness. Hoodoo can also involve conjuring, though it's often, again, meant to be that you're possessed by a spirit or the Holy Ghost, not a demon. In Bali, similar to voodoo, there's a belief in voluntary possession by a spirit. Wiccans believe in voluntary possession of a goddess.
Wait. There's a difference between hoodoo and voodoo?
Yes.
And do they have anything to do with each other?
No.
Wow. What is the difference?
One of the big differences is that voodoo is closer to, I would say, quote unquote, an organized religion.
Voodoo is?
Voodoo is.
Oh.
There's differences between the New Orleans version of voodoo and voodoo of Haiti. whereas hoodoo is more of an individual practice. And there's a lot of differences, and I'm not going to claim to be an expert on either, but that's kind of my main understanding, is that, you know, among many other differences, organizationally, they're quite different.
In the article, hoodoo versus voodoo, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Real brief overview here. Hoodoo followers believe on an omnipotent and unknowable supreme creator named Bondi, or Bondi. His name comes from the French term bon Dieu, literally meaning good God. Generally, a Haitian voodoo service will be conducted in Creole, a Haitian French dialect. Skipping the rest, because there's a lot more, but then we go to hoodoo, which is a form of hybrid African folk magic that often emphasizes the practical use of magic for purposes such as healing, protection, and divination. Hoodoo sounds cool.
Who wrote that article?
This article is from the Universal Life Church.
Great. So we can give credit where credit is due. Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I would love to explore. I have actually a great book on the history of voodoo that I got in New Orleans, but it's like 500 pages long, so I've never been able to like really get into it. But
Too busy looking at all your pictures in Pandemonium.
exactly. So circling back, Wiccans believe in a voluntary possession of a goddess. In Hinduism, demons are, in a lot of cases, a reflection of your own sins. You have to face kind of the decisions and the things that you've done in your life. Occult interpretations of a div from Middle Eastern lore involve burning hair to summon them and piercing their skin with a needle to bind them, which I think is so fascinating.
Okay, you burn hair, and then they show up, and then you stick them with needles, and they're stuck.
Again, this is a very simplistic, high-level overview of it.
I mean, I don't know. There's, tusks?
Div are thought to be huge versions of humans, except with horns and tusks.
Hell yeah.
Which is something I want you guys to remember when we have our demonic stories episode.
Tusks.
Tusks. Also, I think, you know, in Native American culture, a Wendigo is considered a demon in a lot of ways.
That makes sense.
Iranian demons certainly are perceived as evil. And relevant to our discussion today, certain cultures believe that demons can be summoned and controlled, notably also Christianity and Judaism.
We're really jumping around here.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fast facts.
Because, again, we're going to kind of hyper-focus in one specific area, so I wanted to give, just to say, to set the scope, that there's a lot of different meaning out there to a lot of different people, and we're going to talk about a subset of all of that.
I understand.
This episode is not going to be a deep dive into the history of the belief in demons, again, which is impossibly large, but rather a focus on cultures and individuals who believed that they could summon demons and how. Also, we have a whole episode on black masses, which is more in line with Satanism and a lot of false accusations in a lot of cases. But the time period kind of overlaps a little bit, so I just wanted to point that out, that we do have a lot of other relevant episodes. I'll link them in the description, too.
Are black masses always summoning rituals?
No.
It's just like praising demons and shit?
Right. Mostly more in line with the devil.
Mm.
And that's kind of a very thin line that I had to navigate when I was researching this, because there's so much out there about people who are trying to summon and make deals with the devil, or people who have been accused of that. And there's a lot less about demons. You know, that's more of like a very specific group of people.
Sure.
Mostly like people who believe that they're wizards or sorcerers or witches.
Wizards?
Yeah, they believe that they're magicians and that they can do this magical ritual to call forth the demon.
You know, I was just thinking yesterday how, like, women can just
Oh boy.
walk around and dress like a wizard, and everyone's like, wow, you're fashion forward. If a man dresses like a wizard, it's like, what's going on?
What do you mean?
Like, they can wear the big flowy things with the big sleeves, a big gown, and it's just like, wow, someone is dressing up. But
Did something happen to you?
No, I was watching movies.
You could dress up as a wizard.
I know, but then I'm going to get... People are going to be like, what's going on? Why are you dressed like that? No one's going to go up to him and be like, why are you dressed like that?
I think they would, depending on what you're trying to describe.
I don't
was
know.
wearing a big flowy cloak.
Yeah, if you were,
I think
because I know you.
I think people would be like, what's up?
Yeah, but if just like a woman at your office
Yeah.
had a big flowy robe.
Yeah. People would, I think she would be, it depends. Depends on if it's like fashion forward or not.
Yeah, it's fancy.
Okay.
If it's got nice trim, no one's saying shit.
If the point of this is that you would like to explore this, then I think that you should. I don't think you should be afraid of the judgment of society.
No, the point is that I feel shackled.
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. I think you need to just break free.
I don't really want to dress like a wizard. I just feel it's unfair that I can't.
You want the option to.
Yeah, you know, equal opportunity.
I think you do. You just have to be brave enough to take it. You're not going to get arrested for it, so there's nothing stopping you.
I guess the trade-off is that I could also wear the same thing every day and no one says shit.
Alan's uniform of...
Black pants, black shirt.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Christianity and Judaism. With the introduction of monotheism, it caused all of the old gods to become demons. Demons like Beelzebub appear across Christianity, Judaism, and the Testament of Solomon. Since the founding of Christianity, there has been a belief that demons can possess humans. It is believed that an exorcism is needed to cast out this possession. While generally, it is thought that possession is accidental and not the fault of the person afflicted, there are some Bible passages that have been interpreted by some to mean that possession by a demon can be voluntary. And the reason I'm sort of like splitting at this hair is because what we're talking about, again, is not like can or can't somebody be possessed by a demon. It is, are they summoning a demon?
Right.
That's the lens that we're looking at this through. So I think it's interesting because when you see in a lot of horror films and things, somebody goes through an exorcism, it's not usually after that they've done a summoning ritual, right? They've just become possessed. But it's interesting to say that there's some passages in the Bible that people think are kind of hinting at voluntary possession, which is more in line with summoning a demon versus like an innocent person or child, like, you know, Reagan being possessed against her will.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know. Half of these like deep Bible interpretations, like when you read the actual text, you're like, really? This is what they've extrapolated from this? All I'm saying is I'm going to be real skeptical.
That you don't think that's in the Bible?
Anytime that there's mention of some people have interpreted this passage in the Bible to mean this, it's like, I don't know. Sure. Why not?
Well, the reason why I phrased it that way is because I think a lot of people care a lot more about the Bible than I do. And I think a lot of people can we've seen this is the basis of religion, that people can make whatever they want out of a passage in the Bible, and it can become law, and it can become other things. And so it's a sticky thing. So when I look at it, I say, okay, I can understand why people can think that this is somebody voluntarily summoning a demon, but I know that to every one abbey, there's 1,000 people that have a different interpretation of it.
Sure.
I am going to quote from Owen Davies' book, Grimoires, A History of Magic. Quote, "The ancient Jewish people were often viewed as being knowledgeable in magic, which, according to legend, they had learned from Moses, who had learned it in Egypt. Among many ancient writers, Moses was seen as an Egyptian rather than a Jew. 2 manuscripts likely dating to the 4th century, both of which purport to be the legendary 8th book of Moses, the first 5 being the initial books in the biblical Old Testament, present him as a polytheist who explained how to conjure gods and subdue demons." End quote.
Don't you remember from the story of Passover?
No.
How Moses went up to Pharaoh to be like, hey, check out my God's power. And he threw his stick down and turned into snakes. Then Pharaoh was like, psh, check, my wizards can do that. No, he had sorcerers, not wizards. And his sorcerers come out and they all throw their sticks and they turn into snakes. And they're like, what else you got? And then he had to pivot.
I should read some of this. It's very interesting.
There's a great documentary on it.
Uh-huh.
That's on every year around Passover. It's
What's
called the 10 Commandments.
There you go.
Charlton Heston.
What is the different sound between a wizard and a sorcerer?
I'm sure that there is a historical answer to this, but at least in D&D, the difference between a wizard and a sorcerer is this.
Yeah.
Wizards get all of their magic through applied learning. It's acquired knowledge. Sorcerers have inherent magic, and they're basically like just gifted in the arts from birth. So the meme that pops up is the 3 spellcasters in D&D are wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks. The wizard is like the kid that has to always...
Why not druids and fairies? I always cast spells.
Yes, it's different. The wizard is the kid that has to he's like top of his class, but because he always has to study. The sorcerer is the kid that just like gets straight A's without even trying because he's just a prodigy. And then the warlock is just the kid that's sleeping with the teacher.
Right. So like in one case it's learned, in another case it's inherited.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in the third case, it's traded.
Right. So again, I mentioned this, but The Exorcist is sort of, I would say, the pinnacle horror film when it comes to Christian demons, right? Because you have the priest and it's very, it's a very Christian centric film in its belief.
Sure. I think the movie's okay. It's kind of overrated. It's not that scary. I think the application of demons is pretty neat, though. So I would like to know more about Pazuzu.
Yeah.
And I think that's explored in sequels, but I don't know because I haven't seen the sequels. I would just imagine, because that's like how most of these go. Like, perfect example is Hellraiser.
Yeah.
That has so many demons in it. But are they demons? I don't know. They're pretty demonic. But also they're just supernatural beings that are in between realms.
Right.
I don't know. It's
Are they daemons? Like the ancient Greek?
That's what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
But then in the sequels, like that's what they all about. You go into like the deep dive and the history behind the Xenobites and Hellraiser. So I just imagine that one of the Exorcist sequels is like a Pazuzu, the early years.
Well, the demon in The Exorcist, Pazuzu, is thought to be based on a book called The History of the Devil from the year 1900 by Paul Karras. So maybe if you're interested, you could read that book.
It's from 1900?
Yeah.
It's going to be lame. I mean, that's always the problem with this. Like, so much of this material is so rock and roll.
But I will say I've read a lot of ancient text on all this stuff in the past few weeks, and it's very readable because it's all translated. And so even if the language is a little bit heavy, like it's way more accessible than you think it is.
That's a really good point.
It's also short bursts of like literally textbooks, like how you conjure a fucking demon. So it's not like heavy passages.
I took a demonology class in college.
Yeah.
I remember that. It was like the foreign texts were so much easier to read. It was the old English ones, or just like, sorry, the English ones that are very, very old, not necessarily old English.
Yeah.
That were so hard to get through just because they're written with a diction that people don't use.
That makes sense.
And I hated it. And it's like, I just want to hear about these, like, the inspiration behind the demons of Diablo.
Sure. That's all you care about.
Because all the demons from Diablo are pulled from something. This class was just so freaking dry. And I'm like, how? How could this material be so dry? But it's just because I feel like people just had too much time back on their hands back then, because they could have just written it down in like a cool way, but instead they're just like, no, we're just going to really make this the most methodical, dry piece of literature ever written.
They didn't have TikTok to take up all of their free time.
They didn't even have Snapchat.
That's right. So 2 other films I want to talk about when it comes to Christianity and demons. One is Rosemary's Baby, which you all know how I feel about Roman Polanski. However,
great guy, shitty movie.
Shitty movie. No, shitty guy, good movie. You know what? Shitty guy, okay movie.
It's a boring movie.
But I know people fucking love it, despite the fact that he's a terrible guy. But I do want to say, like, it is important to the history of cinema in this lens. And it has, the big kind of tie-in to the dabbling with black magic and the dark arts and the summoning of the devil. The other film I want to mention is The Conjuring. And the interesting kind of tie-in to this is that there is a paranormal, they're past at this point, but there was a paranormal investigation / demonologist couple based in Connecticut called the Warrens that gave us a lot of, they're very controversial, but they gave us a lot of the horror films that kind of have this, because they believe so much in demons. In their work, they kind of became these celebrities. A lot of the horror films that we have kind of tell their story. So you have Amityville Horror, which is something that they investigated and claimed was demonic. You have the Conjuring House in Connecticut. You have, all of these kind of things that are based on their investigations, because they were very fast and loose by saying, oh, demons, it's demons, it's demons. So they're kind of in the paranormal community thought to be a little bit fraudulent. But anyway, the point is that because of their work, whether fraudulent or not, or exaggerated, I would say maybe is a better word or not, the Annabelle stuff, right? All that comes from them. And so that's like a whole host of films that you could categorize under demonic possession, demonic summoning in some ways that we should attribute to kind of the potentially fraudulent or exaggerated work of the Warrens.
Abby, the Warrens, they come up all the time. They don't make great movies.
Well, they don't make movies at all.
I know, but I'm not a huge fan of all their Conjuring stuff.
Well, I think that whole franchise, which is massive, after the first few films really becomes trash. Like the Nun films are so bad. We watched the La Llorona film, which was also bad, which was a shame because that legend is worthy of a very cool horror film. But I agree. I think sort of in their practice in life and in the kind of films that they have inspired, it's not great. Also, the Amityville stuff, I think, we don't have like a really good Amityville horror movie. And again, that whole case is totally based on nothing. It's like a whole hoax. But
I mean, I don't know. There's like 30-something Amityville horror movies.
Yeah, and there's like 30-something Conjuring movies.
Yeah, and this is a talking point. I don't think we ever got the official answer. Is the Conjuring universe the biggest horror film franchise?
Let's find out right now. The Conjuring universe is the biggest horror franchise. Also the highest grossing horror film franchise.
Yes, but we did talk about that point, and it's not because any of the movies individually are massive, massive earners.
There's so many of them.
Yeah, but they all do well, and there's so many.
No, I don't think it's the biggest. I think it's the biggest, the highest grossing. I think there's only like 10 films or so in it, according to Wikipedia that I'm looking at right now.
But I don't know, because there's like so many in Amityville alone, so many in The Conjuring, and they're all linked.
Yeah, but it's all saying the 7 movies in the Conjuring universe.
Yeah, there's no way. We did a deep dive in this a long time ago.
Regardless, it's a very big film franchise. It's pervasive in the horror community in that, again, like the Amityville stuff, the Nun stuff, there's all these sort of offshoots which feed into it. I just think it's sort of cheap horror in a way.
Just because I was Googling the same thing, guess what the longest running film franchise of all time is?
Halloween. Oh, film franchise of all time.
Yep.
Is it horror?
Yeah, we've talked about it. Yeah, I'll say it's horror. People screamed during the original, not so much the recent ones. It's King Kong.
Oh.
With a runtime of 88 years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Number 2 is Invisible Man at 86 and a half. Also on this list, I have no idea if this is the number 1, under longest running with a whopping 123 films is the Wong Fei Hung series. I don't know what that is.
It's a lot of films, though. It's a dense series to get into.
Wong Fei Hung is a Chinese martial arts master and folk hero, and these are just a slew of 123 Cantonese films.
Got it. Like, I wonder how many James Bond films they're all in. I guess that feels a little bit similar.
These names are amazing. How Wong Fei Hung conquered the 2 dragons with the 5 snakes. How Wong Fei Hung and his wife conquered the 3 rascals. I'm sure something is lost in the translation, but this is great.
Yeah, they sound fun. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about conjuring a demon, which again can be described in the systems that we're going to talk about as sorcery. The term Goetia is going to come up a lot now, which describes a specific type of sorcery that uses grimoires or spellbooks and rituals. So my freaking favorite type of magic, ritual magic. We're getting into it.
What is the difference between a spellbook and a grimoire?
They're the same. I just said that.
I know, but no one is going to be like, well, actually.
No.
Okay.
That's what they are. The term maleficium refers to sorcery or witchcraft that is being practiced with the intention of causing harm. The term sprang up in medieval Europe, which kind of gives you the sense that dark magic sprang up in medieval Europe, aka black magic. This was one of the charges put forth against the Knights Templar and during witch trials.
Wait, the Knights Templar got arrested?
I actually have a whole article on our website that I wrote about that a while ago because it's kind of tied to why Friday the 13th is a spooky date.
Huh.
But there's some, I think, like false accusations that were happening there, but that's similar with witch trials, right? Later in the Middle Ages, we get words like hex in Germany, bruja in Spanish, and Wicca in English. So because these words are sort of popping out around the Middle Ages, it's just sort of a marker that these interests and these beliefs and the fear of this stuff is kind of also emerging at the same time, right? Grimoires date back to ancient Mesopotamia in the form of clay tablets with inscriptions. Quoting from Wikipedia's page on Goetia, quote, "Throughout history, various cultures have contributed to magical practices. Early Christianity saw the use of grimoires by certain Gnostic sects, with texts like the Book of Enoch containing astrological and angelic information. King Solomon of Israel was linked with magic and sorcery, attributed to a book with incantations for summoning demons. The pseudepigraphic Testament of Solomon, one of the oldest magical texts, narrates Solomon's use of a magical ring to command demons. With the ascent of Christianity, books on magic were frowned upon, and the spread of magical practices was often associated with paganism. This sentiment led to book burnings and the association of magical practitioners with heresy and witchcraft," end quote. So again, this is kind of circling back to our thesis statement here, which is like, demons weren't always demons. Christianity made belief in any other beings demons, and the belief in sorcery and magic and all of these things became bad because they weren't the belief in God and Jesus and all of these things.
Sure.
Enochian magic is a system of magic created by John Dee and Edward Kelly during this time, again in the Middle Ages.
So those are very modern names.
Yeah. Well, in the Middle Ages, but still, yeah, they are. And they are to thank for the roots of esoteric tradition. Their work was centered around invoking entities and commanding them, though their main focus was invoking spirits and angels. The Enochian system is incredibly intricate and advanced and full of precise details, which we will see over and over again with magic systems. It requires precise locations, tools, and a deep understanding for the ritual. For anyone familiar with the work of H.P. Lovecraft, the history of the Necronomicon had John Dee as the translator of one of the versions of his mythical book of forbidden lore.
Forbidden lore?
So that was just sort of like essentially that H.P. Lovecraft named a character after this esoteric magician from the Middle Ages.
Sure.
The Greater and Lesser Keys of Solomon are texts that were wrongly attributed to King Solomon. The Testament of Solomon is one of the oldest magical texts in existence. It's a Greek manuscript that likely originated in Egypt or Babylonia in the 5th century and 1,000 years after the death of King Solomon. Essentially, the Keys of Solomon are compiled from other grimoires and texts. One very important thing to note is that the demons from the Lesser Key are essentially reskinned spirits from other religions or mythologies. Again, similar to how pagan holidays have been reskinned as Christian holidays, which we've talked about a lot on many other episodes, actually, like our Samhain and Yule episode. I also have a video on Valentine's Day, the history of Valentine's Day, and all of these three kind of talk about how at one point in time you had pagan festivals and rituals, and those things are now Christmas and Halloween and Valentine's Day, right? It said that Archangel Michael gave Solomon a magic ring that allowed him to bind demons from hurting anybody. But he used the magic to constrain the demons in jars and put them to work. 72 demons, in fact.
He captured demons, put them into little vessels that he kept, and then would sometimes put them to work. How is this not Pokemon?
Okay, maybe you have a good point. Eventually, he was tempted into worshiping false gods, aka the demons, and lost his favorable standing with God and Michael. Again, all according to mythology. Though alternative stories also say that he captured the demons in a brass vessel and threw it into the sea. When the Babylonians discovered it, they accidentally opened it, not knowing what it was, and unleashed the demons onto the world. The Greater Key is a grimoire that dates back to the 14th or 15th centuries. It is believed to be a product of Renaissance magic. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Italy saw a boom of magical belief, similar to what we would call in modern day occultism. I'm going to quote from Gregory W. Dawes in The Rationality of Renaissance Magic. Quote, "Both bourgeoisie and nobility in the 15th and 16th centuries showed great fascination with the 7 arts magicae, which exerted an exotic charm by their ascription to Arabic, Jewish, Romani, and Egyptian sources. There was great uncertainty in distinguishing practices of vain superstition, blasphemous occultism, and perfectly sound scholarly knowledge or pious ritual. Intellectual and spiritual tensions erupted in the early modern witch craze, further reinforced by the turmoils of the Protestant Reformation, especially in Germany, England, and Scotland. The people during this time found that the existence of magic was something that could answer the questions that they could not explain through science. To them, it was suggesting that while science may explain reason, magic could explain unreason, end quote.
That's neat.
Yeah. This era also brings us Nostradamus, famous for his ability to predict the future. Dr. Faustus, aka Faust, a German alchemist and magician, who was eventually denounced from the church for being in league with the devil.
Busted.
And again, that's Faust, right? We all know that story.
I don't know it.
Well, don't worry. There'll be lots to explore there. But generally, during this time, there was a lot of discussion, debate, and philosophy about religion, witchcraft, magic, some for and some against the persecution of these practices. Around this time is also when tarot went from a playing card game in Italy to a divination tool. So it's a rich time period that birthed many different thinkers and practices that not only still exist to this day, but are incredibly prominent in horror, pop culture, and in spiritualism in a lot of ways. It was kind of like a very dense Big Bang, if you will, when it comes to magic.
Speaking of tarot,
Yeah.
what's a hierophant?
According to the Oxford English Dictionary,
They know what's up.
a priest in ancient Greece who interprets sacred mysteries or esoteric principles.
Cool. Seems topical.
Yeah, it is. The Lesser Key is a grimoire on demonology compiled in the mid-17th century. The text lists out 72 demons of hell in the Ars Goetia, which is the beginning of the grimoire, and a system for invoking 72 demons, and allowing the invoker to control the demons if done properly. It outlines an incredibly specific and intense ritual, including diets and prep time. The demons in the Lesser Key are not the evil type of demons that we encounter in Christianity or in other religions. In this case, they have their own bespoke attributes, which set them apart from each other. And you're supposed to call upon the relevant spirit to make the relevant ask. So it's kind of similar to how some may pray to St. Anthony if they lost something, right? Like he's the patron saint of lost items or whatever.
Gotcha.
Like if you call upon a certain demon, you're specifically calling upon that demon for his set of skills.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone likes to hire a specialist.
That's right.
I mean, yeah, you don't call TaskRabbit when you need brain surgery.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Alan. And similar to Celtic mythology, the demons in the Ars Goetia have a very specific hierarchy. Some are dukes, some are presidents, etc. Some demons appear as humans, others as monsters, once they're summoned. And also, each demon has its own sigil, which is like a symbol that's assigned to it.
I know what a sigil is.
And as you might imagine, these symbols are used in the invocation rituals and allow the participant to control the demon. But these demons, also called the Goetic demons, are believed to be bound by God. The ritual that the Ars Goetia outlines involves the participant binding himself first to God in an effort to use God's authority, and then to the demon. So essentially they use the circle. I wish this was a visual podcast, but the summoning circle that you see in like any horror movie, they create a circle. That circle is what they use to sort of commune and be protected by God. Then they create this triangle outside and the sigil of the demon. And that's how they call the demon. But essentially how this works is in this very specific system, again, there's multiple, but in this system, the Lesser Key of Solomon, they are first calling upon God or godlike spirit, God's energy, and saying, okay, I am one with this. I have this authority given to me. So because all of these demons are still technically bound by God in this belief, I now can call the demon. So the first part is calling God, essentially. The second part is calling the demon and then using your authority, granted by God by proxy to be able to control the demon. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You also need to put some runes.
So you draw, it's not runes, it's the sigil.
I mean, depends. You can use runes.
Runes are different.
I know they're different, but you can use them sometimes.
Okay, but they're different symbols. Also, I thought this was interesting that Hebrew is thought to sort of be connected energetically to like a higher language of the angels or of the divine. So just the fact that some of the invocations are in Hebrew sort of unlocks this divine energy, if you will, in this space.
It was always weird because when you see a lot of occult imagery, you know, especially like affiliated with like Satanism or something, there's always Hebrew.
Yeah.
You know, looking specifically at the Church of Satan, I think that's the actual Satanist one,
Right.
has the pentagram, and with, you know, the head of Baphomet in the middle. On each of the 5 points of the pentagram is a Hebrew letter, and I always thought that was weird. But now it's actually making a lot of sense because all this ties back to the 72 demons of Solomon, who was clearly associated with the Hebrew language.
It's also just interesting to think about the time when all of these things, you know, and this has happened over thousands of years, but like when all these religions and beliefs were sort of melding in a different way than they are now. Like right now they seem very clear and different, but they've kind of inspired each other over the years.
Oh yeah, not to mention so many of the like the little things that have just like died out over the years.
Right. One element from the Lesser Key of Solomon that is incredibly influential to horror is this protective circle that you cast while summoning. And I'm not going to say it originates there, but it's certainly quite a big part of it. So there's a few horror films that I want to talk about with the Lesser Key of Solomon. And one thing I want to say is that these rituals, again, these medieval rituals, are so intense and painstaking that when you see it translated to a lot of modern horror, it's not super interesting. There's one film that we'll talk about that really is kind of like as true to the ritual that we've seen. But in general, of course, for cinema, they have to be adapted in a way that's fresh and new and, you know, is interesting to watch.
Sure.
So one film to talk about, which I posted a bit about during the holiday season, is a film called The Sacrifice Game.
Great game,
which came out in 2023. It was written by Sean Redlitz and Jen Wexler, our friends, and directed by Jen. It's great. We both love the film a lot. But the thing that's really cool is that you can see how they are inspired by the Lesser Key of Solomon. And I'm not going to talk about this too much because actually, spoiler, we have an awesome interview with them that we're going to release as part of this series that we're doing on demonic summoning. But this is kind of like you have some time now before that episode comes out to go watch it because you'll see how they sort of take that and they translate it in this really cool, modern, totally unique to them way of having like a ritual that requires a lot, but it's interesting to watch and visually it's kind of graphic and violent and it's, you know, it's pretty rock and roll.
Also, without getting too into it, because we talk about this extensively on the interview with Sean and Jen. One thing that I didn't really realize until now was I think I liked the world building of the Sacrifice Game so much because it was grounded in historical texts.
Right.
It just adds the little sense of, I don't know, authenticity when you start seeing, you know, real demon names, you know, quote unquote real.
Yeah.
But at least things that originated from a historical text. It's a cool detail.
It is. Yeah. This next thing I was really excited to learn about. I didn't know this. I always thought that Hereditary was just sort of like a pagan, you know, Wiccan kind of take on horror. The whole ritual and again, spoilers, but the ritual and the god. But in fact, Pyman, who is the demon in Hereditary, is from the Lesser Key of Solomon. He's a king. And again, the demons in the Lesser Key of Solomon are, some are kings, some are dukes. There's a hierarchy to them. And he's a king. And in the film, he's a king. But like, it's all inspired by the Lesser Key of Solomon.
That's cool.
Yeah, I had no idea. So the film A Dark Song is also one that we have to talk about. It's probably the most true to what some of these rituals looked like. It's not totally true. I've listened to some discourse of people who are really into this or practice these rituals themselves, and they said it's certainly not one-to-one, but it's the most accurate film that they've ever seen kind of depict one of these rituals.
Yes, I feel like they did a very great job of going step by step,
yeah,
without actually showing you exactly what to do.
Right, because that's dangerous.
I always think about Breaking Bad.
Right.
How you see step by step on how to cook meth. But you don't actually learn how to cook meth from watching the show.
Right.
Despite the fact that you see seemingly every step, there's just a lot of the in-between that you have no clue.
Right.
Because, that's, you you don't want to teach these things.
Right. So the film A Dark Song is actually referencing another system from another book, which is very easy to find online, called The Sacred Magic of Obermelin and the Mage.
That's a fun name.
Yeah. Which sort of rounds out the system of the Goetia and adds this element of magic squares, which I'm a little vague on, but it pops up of like a little bit later. We'll talk about it with occultism. But this is kind of the text that adds that in. So a lot of the modern day occultists use this book, The System of Obermelin, as kind of, their guide.
Is now a good time to talk about summoning circles?
Please.
I don't have much to say.
I'm so intrigued.
However, during because while we were watching A Dark Song, you kept pointing out like, oh, this thing is actually from this text, and this little detail is from this book. To your point, everything was pulled from historical texts, and everything.
I was deep in it.
Yeah, everything has a reason. I kept thinking back to Full Metal Alchemist. It's an anime and manga, but it's all about transmutation, and there is like a big climax because the shapes of these transmutation circles have to be so precise, where like the slightest deviation from it can completely ruin it to detrimental effects.
Right.
And like the big climax is that over the course of many years, someone built a city where all the streets lined up perfectly to make the giant circle, with all the shapes and all the sigils and everything, in a way to basically sacrifice the entire population of the city to do one big magic act.
Holy shit.
It's pretty cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah. But yeah, that's all about transmutation and equivalent exchange, where like talk about having to follow the rules, because if you break any of them, you pay very, very heavily.
Right. The one other system I want to very briefly mention is something called Demonology, in which everything is exactly the same as the systems we've talked about and how you summon these demons, with the exception that you don't sort of summon a demon with the intention of putting them to task or using kind of your authority to control them. You're looking for your guardian spirit, if you will, and you create an altar to that spirit, but you're summoning them in a more respectful, peer-to-peer way. It's just a little bit different. And for anyone out there who's a practicing magician, I wanted to mention that.
So it's like when you summon...
Respect your demons.
It's like when you summon a Pokemon and it's too high level and you don't have the right badge.
Right.
It's out of control.
That's right.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Generally, the practice of conjuring demons is thought of as a way to put demons to work. Some demons are thought to have trickster energy and can easily sidestep the tasks at hand or manipulate and cause chaos. In other legends, they can interact with humans as a proxy for the devil, right? So it's very similar. Like we've seen from all of the different stories and mythology of like when you summon the devil, because you're going to ask him for a favor, he might do it, but do it in a way that like totally fucks you over, right? Like that's the devil's energy. And in there's some belief, right, that some of the demons kind of have that too. Like just because you're asking a demon for X, they might give you X with the caveat of Y, right? It's always a little bit sometimes like meant to confuse and be clever and like, okay, I'll do this, but you didn't realize the outcome is going to be this, you know?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why, like, I always kind of disliked it, like the whole, evil genie approach to it, where, so if you summon a demon with some like BTE or, big trickster energy, and then all of a sudden, to fuck you over, like, I want a sandwich, and it's like, you got a sandwich at 1,000 miles to your head, and it's a bad example.
We should get some big trickster energy merch. I like that.
Thanks. Or it's like you want a new car, and so it's like, great, you do get a car, but it's like straight up monkey's paw, where it's because your family dies and you get a settlement and they give you a car.
Right, exactly. That's a great example.
But I like the other ones where it's like, here's your dark pact that you're going to have to make. Here are the rules. You know the price. And you have to like build up to like paying that price, but you know it ahead of time. I always just think that's cool. I think it's just mean to just trick them.
Right.
And unnecessary.
Yeah. Well, you would be a more thoughtful demon.
Thank you.
So one example I want to talk about quickly is the legend of Faust, because the demon Mephistopheles acts as the devil's agent in some ways. In the late 16th century, the name Mephistopheles was introduced to the Faust legends by the Faust chapbooks. The books are made up of stories about the very real Johann Faust, written by an anonymous German author. These books became the main source for the subsequent plays written about Faust. Quoting from Wikipedia, quote, although Mephistopheles appears to Faustus as a demon, a worker for Lucifer, critics claim that he does not search for men to corrupt, but comes to serve and ultimately collect the souls of those who are already damned. Farnham explains, quote, nor does Mephistopheles first appear to Faust as a devil who walks up and down on earth to tempt and corrupt any man encountered. He appears because he senses Faust's magical summons that Faustus is already corrupt, that indeed he is already in danger to be damned, end quote. So I think that's important because it kind of circles back to our discussion earlier about voluntary possession, where it's like, okay, it's not just like that demons are hunting out for people to possess or to corrupt or to make deals with. They only come when they sense that you're like already corrupt, or they sense that you are about to perform some kind of summoning, or you do summon them, right? That sort of was this belief at the time that they don't just randomly appear, they appear for a reason, right? And you've done something to invoke them in some way.
I mean, sure. Why would they waste their time? You got to go to where your market is,
right?
You know, there's plenty of bad people out there, and I'm sure they could just scoop them up instead of like trying to convert the good ones.
It's like a shift, right? Between like, oh, the devil is preying on the innocent, to like, no, demons are showing up when there's work to be done, kind of a thing. In the late medieval period in Europe, real belief in witchcraft was on the rise. We all know about the witch hunts and trials, both in Europe and the US, but it's important to unpack this briefly through the lens of demonic summoning. Despite a complete lack of proof, while the belief in sorcery and witchcraft was growing, so did a fear of its impact. Quoting from Ronald Hutton's book, The Wild Hunt and the Witch's Sabbath, quote, the concepts represent a combination of three older mythological components, all of which are active at night. 1, a possession of female spirits, often joined by privileged human beings, and often led by a supernatural woman, quote, a lone spectral huntsman, regarded as demonic, accursed, or otherworldly. 3, a possession of the human dead, normally thought to be wandering to expiate their sins, often noisy and tumultuous, and usually consisting of those who had died prematurely and violently. The first of these has pre-Christian origins and probably contributed directly to the formulation of the concept of the witch's Sabbath. The other two seem to be medieval in their inception, with the third to be directly related to growing speculation about the fate of the dead in the 11th and 12th centuries, end quote.
Okay, this is what I'm talking about. Ronald Hutton, total snooze fest of an author. Like, this is some really cool material, and it's just like, you know what, we're going to make it as dry and boring as possible to just seem like an academic instead of just like seeming cool.
Okay, well, we'll try not to insult our sources, but I will say, so many tales of witches' Sabbaths allude to witches colluding with the devils, specifically versus a demon. But I thought it was important because from this time period, it's something that comes out of it. And there's a little film by Robert Eggers called The Witch, which took the country by storm in 2015. And of course, that's set in Puritan, colonial US. It's not set in Europe. However, you have kind of this sense, right, of this fear of witchcraft and ritual and the summoning of something evil, right? And how that all plays out.
I don't know. When that movie came out and everyone was talking about it, and then you and I watched it on like your little 20-inch TV with like bad sound.
Yeah.
And I was not impressed.
I know. We've talked about this many times. And then since then, I've rewatched it multiple times, and I think it's excellent. I do think it deserves a rewatch from you. If nothing else, to look at the fact that they only use practical, like, fucking candlelight and skylight and moonlight to light the film.
I will go back one more time.
Okay.
Give it a go.
Okay.
Say hi to Black Phillip.
Great.
I mean, he's great. It's a shame
He's
that
the star of the show.
They didn't do a Black Phillip solo film.
Maybe they will.
I hope they do.
Maybe you just need to keep watching it so they have enough budget.
I just really want Samuel L. Jackson to show up at the end and be like, Black Phillip, I want you to join the Avengers.
Okay. Is that what he does in the Avengers?
What?
I've never seen it.
You've never seen a Marvel movie?
He does that in every Marvel movie?
for all of phase 1 and lots of phase 2.
Well, I don't really pay super close attention.
It's the after the credits scene.
Oh, then I'm certainly
Every single
never
time.
watching it.
Nick Fury shows up and goes to Tony Stark and be like, hey, I'm putting together a team. I need Iron Man.
And you think that Black Phillip is going to be on the Avengers?
I think
What's his skill set?
he can look menacing.
Uh-huh.
He can headbutt.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I mean, he's got powers, doesn't he?
Yeah, but
What does he do?
not for good. He's evil.
Okay, so there's the Legion of Doom.
Yeah.
Which,
I know that from Harley Quinn.
Yeah, okay, so now I'm trying to think, does Marvel have... I'm sure Marvel has like a bad Avengers, but I don't know. There's like, the Legion of Doom is the DC version, and it's just like, yeah, the coalition of supervillains. So like, I think Black Phillip, I mean, I don't know, he's kind of like a solo act.
Sure.
But I don't know, seeing him team up with Clayface would be entertaining.
Yeah, that's true.
What can Black Phillip do?
He kills people.
How?
All right, I'm looking at Villains Wiki.
Okay.
His full name is Lucifer. His aliases are Black Phillip, Satan, the Devil, Goat, and King of All. His occupation is listed as ruler of hell. His powers and skill: demonic magic, witchcraft, imbuement of powers, possession, manipulation, shapeshifting. His hobbies: tormenting humans, corrupting young minds, enabling death. His goals: create witches under his influence. His crimes: murder, kidnapping, incrimination, brainwashing, madness inducement, use of dark magic, grand theft, and
Say Grand Theft Auto.
grand theft, animarum, enslavement, spiritual corruption. Type of villain: satanic soul collector. This is the villains.fandom.com entry on Black Phillip.
I mean, I love the idea of this whole profile came after like Black Phillip's onboarding interview.
Yeah.
And they just wrote down in his little file. And now he's getting, arrested because he stole someone's car.
Grand Theft Auto. And he's bad at driving. He doesn't have any thumbs.
Yeah, he's bad. I mean, I know he can change into thumbs,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
I don't know if it's to completely change or if he can just grow arms.
Let's talk about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, aka modern occultism. So the Hermetic Order was a secret society of occultists. Aleister Crowley was famously part of the order, as well as A.E. Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, who created the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, which is the most produced deck in the world.
Do you have it?
I do. It was the first deck I was ever given.
Is it good?
It's very classic.
Is it lame?
It's not lame. It has crazy symbology in it.
Symbology?
Yeah, like all the occultism things they added to it is wild. And also sort of hilarious to me that it's become such a widely used deck because of what it kind of represents that people don't realize. Anyway, Algernon Blackwood, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and W.B. Yeats were also confirmed members. The group adapted the Enochian traditions and sprouted out Crowley. Films like Hereditary obviously are inspired by occultism and summoning, right? So we talked about Hereditary, but it's kind of set in a more modern view of all of this.
That's why it's a good movie.
So that group of folks in Hereditary, again, spoilers, who are performing all of these rituals, would be seen, I think, as modern day occultists.
Sure.
We talked about Renaissance magic, but let's now talk about Aleister Crowley and more modern occultism and its intersection with the summoning of demons. So Crowley was a practitioner of ritual magic and practiced many summonings in his day. In some cases, he would try to conjure up his guardian angel. Other times, he tried to conjure occultists who had passed, so kind of like summoning the dead. And sometimes, yes, he tried to summon demons.
Did he do well?
Well, let's talk about it. Crowley also used drugs as an aid, quote unquote, to his magic.
What drugs?
All drugs. We'll talk about it, but like whatever he does a lot of traveling. So when he's in different regions, he tends to, like when he was traveling through Asia, he smoked a lot of opium. He kind of like whatever the local flavor is. So we also have to acknowledge that he was under the influence in a lot of his rituals, and he has these very bold claims about what happened, but he was fucked up.
There I was, communing with the devil, tripping hard on baby aspirin.
That would be my memoir. Crowley used the book that we talked about earlier, the Book of Aubermelon's System, and believed it earned him union with Godhead status.
Whoa.
Yeah. A real sane person.
That's great.
He also used sex magic and sacrifices. In 1909, he performed an invocation of the demon Coranzon, which involved blood sacrifice. Coranzon first appeared in the writings of occultists Edward Kelly and John Dee, so again, the Enochian magic folks, dating back to the 16th century. After this, the demon also became part of Crowley's religion, Thelema. And I do want to share some of the accounts of this invocation because it's exactly sort of what we talked about today. Kind of like a modern take on somebody who actually tried this system. But I will say that the accounts between Crowley and Newberg, who summoned with him, differ greatly. So that's something to keep in mind. So according to witnesses, the event took place in Algeria. The men created a triangle to act as a safety barrier, which is a little bit different than the lesser key kind of directions. But some say that Crowley himself was possessed with a demon, and others say that the demon manifested outside of Crowley. The triangle is a reference to the instructions in the Lesser Key of Solomon. Once the demon showed up, it said he threw sand over it in order to break the power of the triangle. Like that was a pretty easy,
Pocket
solve.
sand.
But the pages from Crowley's notebook that talk about this incident are missing, and many accuse his account of the events as being unreliable. Despite that, I'm going to quote from Crowley in the book Crowley's Confessions. So this is from his autobiography.
Are you going to write a book called Abby's Confessions?
These are my confessions. Quote, "The name of the dweller in the abyss is Coranzon, but he is not really an individual. The abyss is empty of being. It is filled with all possible forms, each equally inane, each therefore evil in the only true sense of the word. That is meaningless, but malignant, insofar as it craves to become real. These forms swirl senselessly into haphazard heaps like dust devils. In each such chance, aggregation asserts itself to be an individual and shrieks, 'I am I,' though aware all the time that its elements have no true bond, so that the slightest disturbance dissipates the delusion, just as a horseman, meeting a dust devil, brings it in showers of sand to the earth." End quote.
I was just trying to think why Coranzon sounds so familiar. And it's because he's a character in Sandman.
He is. He's also a character in the Shin Megami Tensei games. Have you heard of those?
In passing, but no, I'm not very familiar. It sounds neat.
He also appears in a 1980 episode of Hammer Horror House.
Hell yeah.
Called Guardian of the Abyss. But one interesting thing about Crowley is that, so again, Crowley's from kind of like the early 1900s as reference here. He's taking these Enochian and medieval rituals of summoning demons, and he's experimenting with them, and he's in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they're creating tarot. So there's a lot of similarities between this time period in like this magical Renaissance time period in the Middle Ages to sort of what's happening with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Those kind of become in the timeline of history for us, like these two big points to developing these systems, right? And just in general, like when I do a lot of the research that I do into the history of tarot or other things, like you end up in both of these time periods. You end up with both of these groups, right? Renaissance magic groups, and then occultism during this, Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn period.
Sure.
So they're very rich in kind of like the pervasiveness of the things that they tried. And, it's kind of interesting because what Crowley and a lot of these folks are doing is taking, but most notably Crowley was just really like, this crazy figurehead who had the personality of a cult leader, if you will. And so that's why he became kind of synonymous with all this, because he had the personality to be famous.
Isn't that always the case?
And he certainly isn't innocent, and we should not, he has quite a complicated story,
and a complicated relationship with baby aspirin.
That's right. But if the whole kind of point of this is that they're taking these medieval texts, right? Lesser Key of Solomon, Abramellin's text, Enochian systems, and they're experimenting with this in different ways in like the, late 1800s, early 1900s. And they're making new versions of them, and they're kind of creating shortcuts to them and these other things. And so if you really are interested, you can certainly read a lot more about all of the things that Crowley sort of experimented with, like, again, sex magic, chaos magic. It's quite dense and quite specific. So definitely something that could be many, many, many more episodes if we got into it. But I think it's kind of just this rich time period. And so if you're interested, again, as somebody who's like a modern practitioner of ritual magic, or you're curious about it, Crowley is certainly an interesting place to start. And I will say, if anybody out there is listening, we are not advocating for anybody to try any of these at home. I certainly wouldn't. And I think it's, can be, listen, I don't necessarily believe in demons, but I also still think I wouldn't go out into the world creating a ritual that I think might invoke something or disturb something that's far beyond my ability to comprehend. That's kind of how I think about it.
But it's cool to think about.
It is.
And makes for great movies.
Yeah, and you can find a lot of people online in different kind of groups on Discord or, Reddit or wherever who do this kind of stuff all the time. And so they have, their own versions of some of these rituals that are a little more possible than kind of the intensity of some of the original ones. But they've had experiences and, believe them or not, some of the experiences that they share are quite similar in some ways. And they're also quite fascinating to hear about. The stories are not like, oh, this huge manifestation of a demon appeared in front of me. They're a little bit more vague. Like each demon, that I summoned from the Lesser Key came in a very different way. Like some you feel the fire breath on your neck, but you don't see anything. Some you see a glimmer of an image of where that god or demon might have lived, or, so it's very, very different and bespoke and fascinating to kind of dive into all of that.
I mean, I've always felt a connection to summoning. Every time I'm like playing a game that lets you like build a class, I usually go for like the summoner build. It's just pretty fun, You get to call in these things and they do the old tasks for you and you can have all these friends. It's great. Invocation
is very sexy in a video game or in a movie for sure.
Yeah, it's just when you have to pay the price of like, oh yeah, so you're going to have to like, you summon 3 demons? Okay, that's going to be 3 limbs, please.
Right. I think that's a good point because even if also the thing to say is like, even if some of these people say, okay, I summoned a demon successfully, this happened, I asked for this and it worked, but then in 3 years, this other thing happened, right? And it's like, it's the sense of like, it's not linear. Like you could be punished as a kid because you summoned a demon as an adult.
Oh, interesting.
Like in your lifetime, it was predetermined that someone, it's that kind of stuff that can be really interesting.
So this comes from Spawn mythology. But something that I always found very cool is that the demons in wherever, because there's a few different places in Spawn, but specifically the ones in Hell, they don't have like long-term memory. Mm-hmm. So what that means is that every day they wake up and they go and like torture and do all the, boiling pits, ripping people apart. They're never going to get sick of it because it's for them, it's the very first time, every single time. And because they just don't experience time in the way that humans do.
Right. So
I thought that was neat.
Yeah, it is neat. So I guess the big takeaways from this episode. 1, demons and Pokemon, not so different. 2, demons and spirits, not so different. That all, the belief in a lot of these divine powers is complicated and flawed outside of quote unquote God, right? From Christianity and Judaism. And if you're going to do it, practice safely.
Last takeaway is there's a very big missed opportunity that we never got to see the Avengers fight Black Phillip.
Right. That's an important point as well.
That'd be great.
That'd be great. In my research, I came across a book by Ed Simon called Pandemonium. In the book, Simon talks about how pointless it is to argue about the actual existence of demons. It misses the point in a lot of ways, which is the impact that belief has had on people and the metaphor of demons. So Ed Simon outlines 7 principles of what he calls demon poetics, which I'm going to read now. 1, whether demons exist or not, people's experience of them absolutely exists. 2, the demonic is a network of metaphors, symbols, and images that define the diabolical. They shift and interact with each other in different ways across centuries. 3, as symbols, demons can mean variable and often contradictory things. 4, there is no clear distinction between categories of the aesthetic and the occult, and the demonic poetics is an interpretive frame that understands the literary and the magical as fundamentally the same thing. 5. Some demons are always more symbolically ascendant in a given epoch. 6. Demons exist at the crux of the transcendent, the numinous, the sublime. They are by definition evil, but they are also by definition an aspect of the sacred. There is something in the core of being that encompasses both the divine and the diabolical, but our language is to describe it as always contingent. 7. A history of demonology is by necessity a history of the world. I thought this was a nice sort of way to round out the episode today.
Yes. Also, I do want to point out that at least the copy of Pandemonium that I was looking at is full illustration. So each one of these, like, you're flipping through, looking at all the different demons and everything. It's like an encyclopedia of these, but there's cool pictures. A lot of these demons look real cool.
Oh, yeah, they really do. But kind of the point of Simon here that I interpret it as is that regardless of whether or not we individually believe in demons, we can all agree that what they represent is incredibly powerful and important. I'm going to quote one more time from Ed Simon's book. Quote, "Demons are powerful metaphors. In Lucifer, we have the symbol of unbridled pride. In Azazel, the intermixing of good and evil. In Moloch, the horrors of rapacious consumption. And of course, from a literal perspective, one need not believe that there is a bat-winged entity in the bowels of the earth, or that goat and bull-headed deities stalk our nighttime." End quote. Again, next episode, we're so thrilled to bring Sean Redlitz and Jen Wexler on to talk about their film. So The Sacrifice Game. Jen also directed a film called The Ranger, which I think some of you might be aware of. So watch both of those films in anticipation of the next episode if you haven't seen them, because they are great. They're fun. She is such a fun filmmaker. And I'm really particularly excited about this next interview because we talk so much about the history of horror, right? And then we interpret, okay, these horror tropes came from this thing all the way, thousands of years ago. And that's interesting. But it's kind of like when we talk to Jen and Sean, we hear a bit about the other side of that, how the filmmakers that are creating horror are inspired by these tropes, right? And so it's kind of telling the other side. So I really like it for a lot of reasons, but I think they're fascinating to talk to, and we're really excited to share that with you guys.
You said it great.
As always, thank you guys so much for being here, and we will talk to you very, very soon. I hope you learned something new, and I hope if you take anything into practice that you do it safely or don't.
Yeah.
Don't do it at all.
Don't do it.
Stay away from demons.
And put it on YouTube.
Yeah, but don't tag us.
You can tag us. It's fine.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like some bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon to access our patron-exclusive podcast, Horror Movie Club.
Also, head to lunaticsproject.com to check out our spooky merch and apparel.
You can find us at Lunatics Project on Twitter and TikTok, and The Lunatics Project on Instagram and YouTube, where you'll find our short horror films, cemetery tours, and so much more.
And please rate and review. A little feedback goes a long way to help us grow and get more content out there.
Our cover art is by Pilar Kep, and musical bumpers are by Michaela Papa and Jordan Moser.